Oh, okay. Go. flesh off of your body. And then they told us to never swim in it because at the bottom of that pool there lived mutant mer creatures, mermaids and mermen, who would swim to the surface and eat the flesh off of your body. And we thought that doesn't make any sense because the liquid would eat the flesh off of your body. So what do they have to eat? And we thought maybe those poor mer creatures are starving. We should go to another neighborhood, find a kid, put him in a trash bag, and drop him down for the mer. But of course we never did that. So anyway, we were sitting at the top of Redwood Hill. We were on our bicycles. We were getting ready to ride our bicycles downhill. Now, you children from Midland, Texas, you have to understand that in other places in the world, the ground goes up sometimes. And then it also comes down. So we were at the top of Redwood Hill on our bicycles, getting ready to ride our bicycles downhill, and the goal was to pedal the entire way downhill. And the reason we wanted to do that is because we thought if we pedaled hard enough, we could build up enough friction on our sprockets that our chains would catch on fire. And the reason we thought we could catch our chains on fire is because Nora said we could. And Nora was the smartest girl in the neighborhood. She was the funniest girl in the neighborhood. She was the prettiest girl in the neighborhood. And this is kind of gross. I'm sorry to bring it up. But we were right at that age where boys start to think to themselves, well, if girls have cooties, maybe cooties aren't such a bad thing to have. So when Nora said things like, if you pedal hard enough, you can set your chains on fire, we were like, okay, Nora, you're pretty. We'll do it. Which is not an attitude that ever changes in boys. So there we were, getting ready to ride our bikes down the hill. And then I was trying to remember, front brake, back brake. Because if you're going down a hill like this and you hit your front brake at 100 miles an hour, you're just going to cartwheel. So I was trying to remember that. And I didn't want to set my chain on fire. To be honest with you, I just wanted to know the kid who set his chain on fire. Because when I was growing up, my dad, whenever I was about to do something dumb, my dad would run in the room and he'd be like, no, never cut glass with scissors. He'd say, Dan Carlisle tried to cut glass with scissors. The glass broke. He cut his hand off. He was never the same afterwards. Our dad would say, no, never tie your sled to a moving car. Dan Carlisle tied his sled to a moving car. The car stopped. Dan didn't. He hit his head. He was never the same afterwards. Our dad would say, no, never put a slug in your ear. Dan Carlisle put a slug in his ear, ate his brain. He was never the same afterwards. So I could never follow the chronology of poor Dan's life, but I know that he was never the same afterwards. So the kid sitting next to me on his bike was Elmore Lowfink. And Elmore really wanted to set his chain on fire. Now here's what you need to know about Elmore Lowfink. He was on my baseball team, for those of you who know how much I love baseball. Elmore played t-ball for 2 years. You know what t-ball is, right? There's a thing, it's about this tall, the baseball is just sitting there. It's not coming at you at 90 miles an hour. It's not sliding, it's not curving, it's not corkscrewing, it's just sitting there. 2 years. Elmore never got a hit. He went under the ball, he went over the ball, but the ball just stayed there. So he had graduated from the baseball arts into the bicycling arts. And of all the kids in the neighborhood, Elmore most wanted to set his chain on fire. Because of all the kids in the neighborhood, Elmore had the biggest crush on Nora. Elmore wanted to date Nora. He wanted to go to prom with Nora. He wanted to be engaged to Nora. He wanted to marry Nora. He wanted to have 1,000 children with Nora, spend the rest of his life with Nora. He serenaded her. He would write her love poems that were like, Nora, Nora, how I adore ya. And Nora did not feel the same way about Elmore. Nora thought if she had to spend the rest of her life with Elmore, maybe they could be neighbors if there was a house in between. But Elmore was certain that if he could set his chain on fire, he could win Nora's heart. So Nora said, go. And we started off down the hill. Now, young people, children people, we were not wearing safety gear. Safety, at this point in history, had not yet been invented. When I was a kid, only 4 kinds of people wore safety gear. Professional football players, astronauts, construction workers, and firemen. Right. If your job did not involve running into a burning building, purposely crashing into another person, having an I-beam dropped on your head, or re-entering the atmosphere, if you wore safety gear, you were kind of a wimp, and that's all there was to it. Plus, we didn't need safety gear, because we had something you don't have. We had something called tough skin blue jeans. And tough-skin blue jeans were made by the Sears and Roebuck Corporation. They were made from DuPont Tribond 490 polyester. They had reinforced knees. The sales slogan was, "Your child will outgrow them before you wear them out." I was the last of 5 children, which means I never owned a new pair of clothes, pants. So my pants were 4 kids in when I got them, and still I couldn't bend my knees. Everybody walked around town like they had just peed their pants. So, and you could be going down the highway in the back of a pickup truck, 10 kids in the back of a pickup truck. That was totally legal. It's probably legal here still. And your dad hits a bump, and one kid goes flying out and just slides along the highway. That child would be fine as long as they were wearing tough-skin jeans. And they just kept from their hip to their ankle on the highway. You just slide along. The only thing that could go wrong is if you had one of these little metal rivets and you started to get some sparks. If you were beside a tanker truck that had a leak, it would explode. And you would be fine. No, you would be gone from the waist up and the ankles down. But anything covered by your jeans would be fine. And I know that you children, I know what happens. Your adults say to you, you don't have to look at them or confirm this in any way because they're with you. But I know they say to you, go out and play, right? They're like, why don't you put down the remote control, put down the video gamey thing, put down your phone, and go out and play. And you're like, okay, I'll go. And you get to the door, and your mom's like, wait, sunscreen. And then you're about to go. She's like, wait, bug spray. And then you're about to go out. And then she's like, wait, safety gear. And then you're about to go out. And then she's like, wait, hydrate. So you have to drink a bunch of water. And then you have to pee, and then it's supper time. So I understand why you don't want to go outside. Well, my daughter, when she was little, I put her in her safety gear, put on her helmet and her gloves and her knee pads and her elbow pads and her shin guards and her bulletproof vest until all you could see was this much of her face. And I put her on that little seat on the back of my bike, and I grabbed the handlebars, and I went to get in, and bam, I kicked her right in the face. Only place that could have hurt her. That's not true. That didn't happen to me. I read that in Reader's Digest, but I liked it, so I stole it. And that, young people, is how you cite a source. So we're going down the hill. Pedal as hard as we can. And I was looking for dogs. And I'll tell you why I was looking for dogs. Because my dad said you have to be careful on those bicycles. Those tires are razor thin. And if you hit a dog, you will cut the dog in half. And as soon as my dad said that, I knew he meant, be careful, don't hit a dog. But as soon as he said that, all I could think was, I want to hit a dog. And it's not that I don't like dogs. I love dogs, but maybe it could be a rabid dog, like an Atticus Finch thing. Read a book. So anyway, we're going downhill. Pedal as hard as we can. And we get to my house. You're supposed to be in 10th gear by the time you get to my house. Other kids are already chickening out. Elmore was right beside me. Nora was a little bit behind us. Now, Nora couldn't set her chain on fire because Nora didn't have a bike. Because when Nora was born, we never knew why, but her legs just never worked right. And so she'd been in a wheelchair her entire life. But she was the kind of kid that when she said to her parents, I am going to ride my wheelchair down the hill, they did not say, oh gosh, Nora, we think that's a bad idea, because they had known her whole life. So they said things like, oh lordy, we better take a welding class. And so they had welded her this wheelchair. It was like the inside of a NASCAR race car. It had big steel pipes. It had a plexiglass windshield. It had nets on the side. It had big off-road tires. It had a seat with a 27-point harness system. It had a steering wheel and a handbrake. And because she couldn't set her chain on fire, she just had chains hanging off the back of her wheelchair, and they would hit the ground, and great plumes of sparks would come flying out. So Nora was a little bit behind us. I'm pedaling as hard as I can. Elmore's pedaling as hard as he can. I'm looking for dogs, and we get down to the cleared circle part where the hill sort of flattens out a little bit. More children are chickening out at this point. I believe I hear my mother calling me for the noon repast. I must return home. So we got to that last part of the hill, and it was just me and Elmore left. Elmore was on beside me. Nora was a little bit behind us, and got to that last part of the hill. I could smell hot metal. So I looked down. It's like when you're standing next to an old radiator or a car that just got turned off. I looked down, and my chain was not on fire. My sprocket wasn't even hot. but I could smell hot metal. And I looked at Elmore's bicycle, and his sprocket was red hot. There were heat waves coming off of it, bouncing off of his tough skins, going up into the atmosphere, burning a hole in the ozone layer. And all of a sudden, whoosh, his chain caught on fire. There were 80 feet of flame shooting behind his chain. It was like the afterburner on a jet fighter. And we were so excited, he was screaming, "I'm on fire! I'm on fire!" And he turned around at Nora. He said, "I'm on fire for you!" And the symbolism was lost on us. But we'd done it. We had done it. So we started to brake. Back brake, front brake, and then shoo, Nora shot in between us. Something had gone wrong with her wheelchair, with her brake. She couldn't stop. She was heading down the hill. There was no way she was going to make it around wicked timeout curve. She was going through the trees, off the cliff, into the mer creatures, and then Elmore did the bravest thing I've ever seen in my life. He let go of the brakes on his burning bicycle, and he started to pedal, and I had to see what was going to happen, so I let go of the brakes on my burning bicycle, and I started to pedal, and we got down to the hill, and just as Nora was about to go off the road, when the only thing that separated her from certain death was that little white stripe on the edge of the road, Elmore shot in front of her on his bicycle, grabbed his front brake as hard as he could, stood his bicycle up on his front wheel, kind of wiggled his hips like this, spun his bicycle around in a great 360-degree arc. His back wheel hit the front of Nora's wheelchair, sent it rolling back up the hill. Here was a child who could not hit a baseball on a windless summer day sitting in front of him, who had just rotated his burning bicycle to knock a wheelchair up the hill. And I jumped off my bicycle, grabbed the back of Nora's wheelchair, and I kind of ran it to a stop. And Elmore jumped off his bicycle, and the three of us were there over Elmore's bicycle as it burned into the roadway, breathing the sweet asphalt fumes, which goes on to explain a few things. And when nothing was left but some aluminum ash and some bubbles in the asphalt, Nora turned to Elmore, and she said to Elmore in that tone of voice that only girls can use. It's a tone of voice that girls can use, and you've probably learned it already, but if you haven't, you're right on the edge. But all I ask is that you use it for the powers of good, because it is a tone of voice that girls can use that can make boys do anything. You're sitting there thinking, no, yeah. And so Nora turned to Elmore, and she said to Elmore in that tone of voice with a twinkle in her eye, she said, "Elmore, you can push me back up the hill." And he did.
Build up. Totally true story. And some of you young folks sitting up in here, we got folks in here 60, 70, 80 years old. We didn't have no seatbelt. Your dad was your seatbelt. Threw his arm out when he hit that brake. We didn't have no knee pads and helmets. We're still here. Barbara Mcbride Smith is our next teller. And Barbara was for many years a librarian, award-winning librarian, but I have to remind everybody, library is my favorite place to be. But before the words were written down in books, they were spoken out loud. People gathered together like we are right now, and Barbara has a way of bringing alive stories. There's the King James version of the Bible, the NIV version of the Bible, and then there's the Barbara Mcbride Bring It to Life version, and she does that with myths and stories and personal stories as well. Please welcome a gal from Texas, living in Tennessee right now, Barbara Mcbride Smith.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. It is wonderful to be back in my home state of Texas. Once a Texan, always a Texan. Now, my mama had an absolutely awful singing voice. She had the gusto of Ethel Merman and the tonal range of a chainsaw. My mama couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, and she knew it, but she didn't care, because she loved to sing, and so sing she did. Some of the most embarrassing moments of my young life were spent next to my mama in a church pew. Now, the church that we went to when I was a kid growing up in Waco was the kind that does not use instrumental music. And so everybody in our congregation had to learn to sing hymns a cappella in perfect 4-part harmony. But my mama didn't sing harmony. My mama sang pretty much whatever she wanted to. She sang in her own key, she picked her own tune, she picked her own notes, and she picked her own words. Now, one of my mama's favorite hymns was called Washed in the Blood. But being a Waco Texan, my mama called it Washed in the Flood. Now, I'm going to give you some idea of how my mama sang that song now. I want you to know I am a pale imitation of my mama. I don't sing well, I know that. It's embarrassing to sing in front of people like Charlotte Blake Austin. But I will try to give you some idea of how my mama sang that hymn. Are you washed in the flood, in the soul-cleansing flood of the lamp? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as dough? Oh, be washed in the flood of the lamp. I would look down at that hymn book. I'd look up at my mama, and when we were going home from church, I would say, Mama, you made a mess out of that hymn. That hymn is not about a lamp. It's about a lamb. It's about Jesus, the Lamb of God. My mama would look at me and she would say, why in the world would Jesus want to be a lamb? Everybody knows sheep are dumb as dirt. They don't know when to come in out of the rain. I reckon if Jesus had his druthers, he'd a whole lot rather be a lamp, or at least a flashlight. You know, baby, Jesus was the light of the world. And besides, I am too busy trying to dismember the tune. I don't have time to worry about the words. The Bible says, make a joyful noise unto the Lord, and that's what I'm doing, baby. Well, another hymn that my mama loved was called Farther Along. Now, the second verse of that hymn begins, tempted and tried, we're oft made to wander. My mama called the song Tempted and Tarred because, see, she knew about being tarred. She worked in a sewing factory 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours a day. And she was exhausted by the end of most of those days. Now the hymn says, tempted and tried, we're oft made to wonder why it should be thus all the day long, while there are others living about us. And then you know that last part. While there are others living about us, often arrested. No, that's not what it says, is it? Molested, though in the wrong. My mama sang it a little differently. She'd sing, tempted and tarred, we're oft made to wonder why it should be thus all the day long, while there are uglies living about us, never arrested, though in the wrong. I would point to the hymn book. I'd say, Mama, it does not say never, it doesn't say never arrested. It says never molested. My mama would do a double take at that hymn book, and she would say, why would they put a word like that in the hymn book? That is not a nice word. People ought not to be saying that word in church. I'm not going to sing it. And she didn't. Well, in our church, we had this tradition. At the end of every service, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, prayer meeting, revival meeting, didn't matter. Every service, at the end, we would sing something called an invitation hymn. And it was a way of saying to all the people who were there that day, come on down. Come on down front. Come on down and join our church. Come on down and be one with us. Come on down and confess all your dirty sins in front of us, because we want to know every last gory detail. Well, one of the invitation hymns that we sang a lot, it was our favorite, was called Just As I Am. And you know, the second part says, just as I am without one plea. But of course, my mama didn't sing that. Sometimes I think she changed the words on When she sang that hymn, she would sing, just as I am without one flea. I just wanted to die. I wanted to curl up underneath that pew, and I just prayed that the angel Gabriel would come down and zip up my mama's lips the way he had zipped up the lips of Zechariah. But that never happened. No, my mama wanted me to stand up and sing out proud right along with her. Well, when I was about 12 years old, I learned a new word in Sunday school, and the word was sacrilegious. So I decided I was going to try it out on my mama. So when we were driving home from church one day, I said to my mama, when you sing hymns in church, Mama, are you being sacrilegious? I ducked because I figured her hand was coming right across my mouth. She didn't slap me. She just kept driving for a couple of minutes, and then she just took her foot off the accelerator and she let her old 53 Chevy drift over to the curb. She sat there just staring at the steering wheel for a couple of more minutes, and then finally she looked at me and she said, I don't rightly know, baby. Is that a bad thing, being sacrilegious? Because if it is, no, I am not trying to be that. Now, you know that hymn that we sang today at the end of the service, I know what it says in that hymn. I know it says, just as I am without one plea, but I cannot sing that, baby. I can't. Because, you know, every single day, I have to pray. I have to say, please, please, dear Lord, bring my brothers home safe from the war. Please, please, dear Lord, let these bald tires on my Chevy last until my next paycheck comes in. Please, dear Lord, let this little girl of mine grow up to be a lot smarter than I've ever been. So you see, baby, I cannot sing just as I am without one plea, because that wouldn't be singing the truth. But I can sing just as I am without one flea, because the Lord knows I keep a clean house. So that's the way it was with my mama when I was growing up. And she went on that way the rest of her life, being her same colorful, off-key, out-of-tune self. When my mama celebrated her 90th birthday, the church gave her a big birthday party. And everybody came. It was a huge celebration. I was there. I was watching, and she was cutting that big birthday cake with 90 candles on the top of it. And the new young associate minister hadn't been at her church very long. He walked in, and he brought her a bouquet of yellow roses. And he said to her, Sister Mcbride, I want to thank you. You know, I haven't been here in this congregation very long, and you know, you are the one who made me feel most welcome. Because I'd be sitting there in my pew up toward the front, and I would hear you back there behind me in your pew. I would hear you singing, and it made me feel warm all over. And I thought to myself, yeah, I know that feeling. Just put your head down between your knees, take a deep breath, maybe it'll pass. But he went on, he said, Sister Mcbride, you know, I had a grandma who sang just like you, and I thought, oh, sweet baby Jesus, there can't be two of them in the world. He said, you know, my grandma, she was the one who believed in me. She was the one who thought I could make something out of myself. She was the one who told me I ought to be about the work of the Lord. And so when I hear you, I think of her. You inspire me just the way she did. So you go on singing, you go on making a joyful noise just the way you do, Sister Mcbride. And he gave my mama a big hug. And when he let go of her, she had to dab her eyes with her little pink and yellow birthday napkin. And then she opened those big brown eyes up wide and she began to scan that fellowship hall. It was an I told you so moment. And I knew who she was looking for. Well, I tried to hide behind a plastic schefflera tree, but she caught sight of me. She looked right straight at me, and her mouth lifted up into this big smile, and all those wrinkles on her face just kind of stretched out. And my mama said to me across that fellowship hall, my mama's gone. It'll be 20 years tomorrow that she left this world. But she's not gone from me. I still think about her every day. And every time I go to church, I listen for her voice. A few years ago, I went back to my hometown, Waco, and I walked around the neighborhood where I'd grown up. And that night, I decided to go visit that little church where I'd spent all those years next to my mama listening to people sing hymns in perfect four-part harmony. Well, it was a rousing sermon that night. And after the sermon was over, the minister asked us all to stand as we sang an invitation hymns. Just as I am. I don't know what came over me. It was just this nostalgia that washed across me. I stood up proud the way I knew I was supposed to, and I just belted it out. Just as I am without one flea. There was this little girl in front of me in the pew right ahead of me, little snaggletooth girl. She turned around, she looked at me, and she went. And then when church was over, we filed out of our pews, and she caught me right at the end of the pew, and she said, "Hey, I like the way you sang, but you got the words wrong." And I said, "No, I didn't, darling. I got the words exactly right." And I know I did because I learned that song from an angel. And she's part of the heavenly choir right now. And I bet you that the Lord and the lamp are getting a real kick out of her up there.
Barbara Mcbride Smith, thank you for that wonderful memory of your mother claiming her right to manifest her personal relationship with her Lord by making a joyful noise in her own way. Antonio Rocha is an American citizen of Brazilian descent. He is long and lean, as you see, and uses his body as he tells his story, sometimes just with his body alone, many times with his voice as well. And we will see how he brings his story to life. Antonio Rocha.
All right. Unmasked. So good to be here with you all. Thank you so much for making this happen. As you heard me before, if you're not here, this would have been a rehearsal. And that's no way of telling stories. Yes, I was born in Brazil a long time ago, land far away from here. I'm still a Brazilian citizen, and I do have dual citizenship, but I learned a long time ago not to come through immigration with both passports, because that confused a heck of a lot of American immigration. Why do you have two passports? So because I'm allowed to. A lot of people do. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 passports even. Anyway, long story short, I've been home, cooped up, like many people in the world because of the pandemic. The fall before the pandemic hit, I was on 36 airplanes in a period of 3 months. And then the pandemic hit, and I was home for 19 months. My wife said, you know, since we've been married, we've never been home this long. I've never lived with you for this long. And our 10-year-old, I've never been home with her for that long. And it's been a gift. I know a lot of people are suffering, and a lot of people are losing loved ones and lots of things. But the silver lining of COVID in my life has been being home with Josephine. Josephine is a 10-year-old trickster. Her sense of humor is incredible for a girl that age. She doesn't complain about masks. She goes to school. She's a diligent homework girl. She does everything. She wants everything to be neat. And she cracks up jokes all the time. And then I crack jokes with her. And that brought me to analyzing where jokes live. And this is the idea that landed in my head of where jokes live. Some jokes live in the present moment. You see a situation and you make a joke out of it, such as a prank or a practical joke. Like Josephine was with me shopping for her mom, my wife, for Mother's Day. We went to a flower shop and my wife had given me instructions to go and get her a squirrel-proof bird feeder. We live in Maine, and we have lots of birds in the yard, and I went with the mission with Josephine to get my wife a bird feeder that was squirrel-proof. I get there, and the thing comes in 30 different parts. There are multiple ideas of how it should stand, multiple ideas of how it should stick up, and multiple items of how you can finish it up. It's not just one item. It's a combination of 30 different pieces, and you can buy each a different price, and I'm confused which one should be better. And I turned to Joseph and I said, do you think Mom deserves all this? And without missing a beat, she goes, you know, happy wife, happy life. So that's a joke that she came up on the spur of the moment. That joke lived in the present moment. Other jokes live in the past, such as you remember something that happened, you manipulate it, and you tell something that happened in the past. So that's where those jokes live. You know, stand-up comedians make a lot of jokes, and storytellers as well, about things that have happened. They tailor it a little bit and deliver it to an audience. Those live in the past. But then there are those jokes that live in the future. And this is the joke I wanted to tell you about. I believe that jokes in the future exist in many different places. In the car of a teenager who just learned how to drive. In a restaurant in a land far away where people are gathering for the very first time. They exist in special events, Thanksgiving tables. These are entities that are invisible. These jokes are waiting just for the right set of characters that will give them the chance to manifest themselves. And they are incredibly well written. They're just waiting to be born. They have a beginning, a setup. They have a beautiful arc and an amazing punchline. Those jokes, you have to go to them. They exist in the future. So I've been home for 19 months, and people go, how is it going with you, Antonio? Are you able to make a living as a storyteller? And I'm like, yes, it's been amazing. You know, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. I learned how to work with Zoom, and because I traveled so much prior to COVID, I've been able to Zoom stories in Hawaii, Zoom stories in Singapore, teach a workshop in India, go to Austria on Zoom, 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 Zoom. And I stand on this beautiful rug in my home studio, and I tell people, I'm traveling in the world with my magic carpet. It's a magic carpet ride. And so I've been Zooming a lot, doing some personal stories, and uploading videos into Vimeo, and people download them and they pay to watch them. It's been nothing short of a miracle. And all of a sudden, in September, I open my email and there it is. An invitation to go to the UAE and tell stories at the United Arab Emirates. Now, I've told stories in 17 different countries. I've been on 6 continents, but I had never been to the Arab Peninsula. And I always wanted to go there. I mean, I grew up in Brazil with stories of Aladdin, 1,001 Lives, the camels, and the dunes, and the sunsets. And there are a lot of Arabs in Brazil. Way from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. My mom, who was Portuguese descent, used to make things for our birthdays that I grew up thinking were Portuguese, but they were Arabs. And I'm like, all of a sudden I'm looking, I'm like, but how am I going to get there? How am I going to get to the Arab Peninsula during COVID? This is going to be crazy. So I talked to them and said, is everything insured? Because if I get COVID, I'm going to have to cancel the trip last minute, and I'm not going to pay for the loss. No. Everything, is insured. Don't worry. If you get COVID, you'll be really sad, but you don't have to pay for anything. We're going to guarantee everything. And that's the standard of traveling to any festival. They pay for all your accommodations and all your travel expenses. They had seen me in Sweden 2 years prior, so they've been trying to get me there for 2 years. And I turned to Cheryl, my wife, and said, you know what, I'm going to say yes. And I said yes. They sent me the ticket, and they sent me the hotel reservations, and they sent me a protocol for COVID. I had to get an RT-PCR test in order to board the flight in Boston on Emirates Airline. And I'm like, okay, no big deal. I'll take the RT-PCR. Now, this is September. Maine is up to here with the Delta variant. Kids are going back to school, and cases are rising, and the labs are overworked. And the nightmare is started. Trying to escape New England to the Middle East. Quite the opposite story, right? And I'm like, calling a lab, I need an RT-PCR. You do PCR and NAAT. I need an RT-PCR, not the AANT. You don't do RT-PCR. Okay, thank you very much. I need an RT-PCR. It has to be done within 3 days of the flight, before the flight. What is RT? RT. Okay, thank you. Okay. Some labs didn't know what RT was. Others thought it was rapid test. No, it's not rapid test. It's real-time test. It's how they process the test. And lab after lab after lab around Portland, Maine, 50 miles away from Portland, Maine, none of them would take a test like that. And the few who would not guarantee they would deliver the results in 3 days. And then I would miss the flight. And all of a sudden, this gig started to slip away from my hands. I'm like, how am I going to get there? It's one thing to get sick and not be able to go, but not be able to take a test? 1 week prior to the trip, I started to shake. I'm like, I'm going to have to call them. I have to take a test in 3 days. They need the test 3 days prior to the flight. And I start to lose sleep. And that's not a good thing for me to lose sleep over this. And I'm calling, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, call the consulate in Washington, D.C. So I went on Google, UAE consulate. There's one in Boston. That's where the flight is leaving for. Exactly. Of course there's one in Boston. So I called, and it was like written in the stars. I call, and there's no music. There's no waiting time. I called the number for the UAE consulate in Boston, and the phone rang twice. Yes, may I help you? I said, is this a consulate? Yes, it is. There's no music, no waiting time. I'm like, I need an RT-PCR. I'm getting on a flight this coming Friday. And I don't know where you should take one, but a friend of mine knows. I'll transfer you to him right now. Mohammed, with a very thick American accent, Arab accent. Yes, you go to such and such, it's complicated to tell you over the phone. I know exactly where you should go. Is this your cell phone? Good. I'm going to text you everything you need to know. Good luck. I couldn't believe this. Mohammed, on a Friday, a week prior to the trip, texts me the clinic in Boston. I called the clinic, and they scheduled me the test. RT-PCR. Yes. We do this to people going to Dubai all the time. We're going to get your RT-PCR. Yes, it's less, no, we guarantee less than 3 days. You're all set for Wednesday morning. Oh my goodness, it's going to work. Now all I have to do is hope I don't get sick between now and Wednesday. It's a Friday. Wednesday I'm going to go to Boston. And then my wife comes home that Friday from school. That's been a close call with COVID. I might have it. And I have to mask. I'm in the house wearing a mask, sleeping with a mask on. She never got COVID. I go to Boston. I get the test. In 22 hours, I get the negative result. I go to Boston on that Friday, and I board a flight to the Emirates. And I'm sitting there, and my seat turned into a 2-meter bed. And I'm sitting on the bed at 33,000 feet with the stars going by. And I'm like, this is my magic carpet ride. I've been telling people for 19 months, I'm riding on my magic carpet ride. And I get there, and my goodness, their hospitality, beautiful people, warm-hearted people. My hotel is right on the beach, and I'm walking the beach and collecting shells by the Persian Gulf. And I'm supposed to open the whole event. I'm supposed to be the first storyteller to go on stage. And then I go on stage, and we all go to a restaurant. We had to be tested again all the time while there. Very efficient. Test would come back in 2 hours. We're out of this restaurant celebrating the opening of this great international narrators forum. And I'm sitting there with Ahmed Al-Azadi from Saudi Arabia. We've been talking for 2 days now. He's super sweet. He's wearing his robe, all white, with his head dress, and he's a filmmaker, storyteller, and we've been talking and exchanging jokes and anecdotes about Brazil and about Saudi Arabia. And there's a woman from Morocco, there's a gentleman from Lebanon, and we're there eating Arab food. Oh, beautiful tabbouleh and all the meat, the chickpea one, I forget right now, that we eat here all the time. I can't believe I've forgotten that. Hummus, okay? And we're there, and I said, I'm going to guess Ahmed about his family. You know, he's a friend now. We've been together for 2 days talking. I said, do you have kids? I have 2 daughters. Now, his English was limited. But when I said I had 2 daughters, his eyes lit up. A warm smile surrounded his face. And he's like, oh, I have children too, Antonio. And he starts at 33, down to 31, then 30, and he won't stop. And he's going down the list of kids he has. And I'm trying to pay attention, but now I lost the count. I'm looking at him, and he's done, and he's proud. And I said, how many children are there? He's like, 7 children, Antonio. I'm like, wow, my mom had 5 kids. I'm the youngest of 5. You have 7. I got 2 kids. And he goes, yes, but I have, and he got stuck. And he couldn't produce the word. And then it all came to me. You know how memory works. I have a collection of National Geographic magazines, over 100 in the bookcase in the living room, and I read them from time to time, and had read an article that in Saudi Arabia, men can marry up to 4 women, as far as they treat all the 4 equally. And I'm like, he's stuck on the word wife. He can't think of the word wife. Like I couldn't think of Barbara's middle name just 1 hour ago. So he's stuck. He's like, I said, you have 3 wives. And his eyes go bigger. His smile disappears. I'm like, oh my goodness, what have I just said? And he's like, no, not 3 wives. Oh. And he turns to the man from Lebanon, and he's just rapid Arabic to the man from Lebanon. The man from Lebanon is listening to him, and he cracks up on laughter so loud. All the tables are looking at him, and he's laughing out loud, and he goes, Antonio, no, Ahmed doesn't have 3 wives. He just doesn't know the word for triplets. And the whole restaurant breaks out in huge laughter, and that is the kind of joke that lives in the future, but you always have to tell them in the present. Thank you.
Antonio, Jose, thank you for sharing a piece of that trip. Boy, COVID has certainly made our lives complex in so many ways. Things have changed. Who knew that we could have invested in Zoom a couple of years ago? Well, here at the Midland Storytelling Festival, you don't have to put any money out to reap the benefits on the riches of Donald Davis from Ocracoke Island in North Carolina. Donald Davis.
I have a little brother named Joe. He's 75 years old, and he's the most patient person I know in this whole world. He is never in a hurry. He never gets upset. He is his email address is Slow Joe. But when we were little kids, do you think he was patient back then? If he got hungry, he thought food ought to already be in his mouth. If we were going to go somewhere, why aren't we in the car? Where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? As soon as we got in the car, how much farther is it? Where are we going to get there? And if he had to go to the bathroom, he better be halfway there before he thought of it. So for a little kid who has absolutely no patience, what could be the hardest time of the year? Christmas. When presents started piling up under the tree and he started going totally crazy. He would sneak in the living room, he'd pick up the presents. He wasn't even old enough to read his name yet, 4 years old. And he'd try to figure out which ones belonged to him, and he would shake them and shake them and shake them. And our mother would come in there and say, Joe, stop that, stop that. You don't open those until Christmas time. Do you think that helped? That just made it worse. And then when nobody was watching, he would sneak back into the tree. He would pick up a present that now he knew was his. He would hide behind a big chair and open it. Now, he wouldn't just open it a little bit to see what it was. No, he would totally open it, take it out, and play with it. And then he would try to fix it back so nobody would know. You think he could do that? No, by now the ribbon's probably lost, the paper's torn. Sometimes he couldn't even get it back in the box right. But he knew where our mother kept the tape, and so he'd make up for it with tape. It'd be tape, 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 tape. Those were the awfulest looking presents in the world. And in spite of that, he would dare to say, look, somebody's been messing with my presents. I thought, yeah, I know who it was too. Well, Christmas would come, and we'd start to open our presents, and my little brother would pick up one of these presents, and he already knew what it was, and he'd say, oh, I wonder what this is. It's from my grandmother. I wonder what she got me. And he would open it up, and he would take out some little toy and say, oh, look at this. I've never seen anything like this in the whole world. I think, liar, liar, liar. My mother and daddy tried every way in the world to break him from doing that, and they made absolutely no progress. Well, he got to be about 7 years old, and one day we came home from school, and he was crying. My mama said, what's the matter, Joe? And he said, big boys at school told me something terrible. She said, what'd they tell you? He said, they told me if you were bad, Santa Claus wouldn't bring you good stuff. They told me if you were bad, Santa Claus would bring you nasty things like lumps of coal and stuff like that. And he was crying and crying and crying, and our mother tried to settle him down and said, now, Joe, calm down. Don't worry about that. Those old big boys are just mean. Santa Claus is good. Santa Claus is not going to bring you old bad stuff like that. Just don't even worry about it. Well, all of a sudden, he got a big smile on his face, and he said, I already knew that. My mom said, what do you mean? He said, Santa Claus doesn't know anything. She said, what are you talking about? He said, well, I tell you, I got it figured out. Santa Claus asked me what my name was. If he doesn't even know my name, how's he know whether I've been good or bad? I knew all the time they were fooling me. I am not scared of Santa Claus. And my mother said, well, let's just wait and see how everything happens by Christmas time. Well, time went along. We'd go talk to Santa Claus, and the presents built up under the tree, and Joe kept opening his presents till he knew what was in every single one of them. He just knew what was in them. And then Christmas morning came, and we got up, and we came in the living room, and Santa Claus had brought us just about everything we had ever asked for. And my mama came in, and my little brother's standing there. I'm playing with my toys, and he's just standing there laughing his head off. And she said, what in the world is so funny? He said, I was right. Santa Claus doesn't know anything. She said, what are you talking about? He brought you all this good stuff. He said, that's what I'm talking about. He brought me good stuff, and I've been bad. And then my daddy showed up. And he said, well, Joe, let's open some of the presents from the relatives. He picked up a present. It was from my Aunt Esther. He already knew exactly what it was. He opened up that present. He had a hard time because it had so much tape on it. And he pulled back the paper, and he looked down in the box. It had a rock in it. My dad said, what'd you get? He said, rock. My dad said, what? And didn't quite hear. A rock! A rock! My dad said, well, open this long one from Uncle Spencer, see what it is. He opened that long present. It had a bundle of switches in it you could get spankings with. The more he opened, the worse it got. He opened a present from my grandmother. It was lumps of coal. He opened another present. It was empty dog food cans. Hadn't even been washed out. Just old dog food juice dripping all out of them anywhere in there. He opened one. It had a broken Coca-Cola bottle in it. He opened one. It had a vacuum cleaner bag already full vacuum cleaner bag in it. There was not one single toy all the way through. And my mother said, I wonder why that happened. He said, I don't know. And my parents sat there and just watched for about 20 minutes while I played with my toys and my little brother just cried. They just held out and sat there and watched and watched and watched. And then my daddy got up and he went over and he went in the closet, and when he came out, he had all Joe's toys in his arms. My little brother said, I should have known. You did it. And my mother said, well, I thought you said Santa Claus didn't know anything. He was crying. He said, Santa Claus doesn't know anything. He brought me good stuff. All this terrible old mess, it came from my own relatives. And my daddy said, maybe your relatives know more than Santa Claus knows. Well, the next year, about 2 weeks before Christmas, my mother said, oh, boys, I've got an idea. Why don't we each pick one present to open ahead of time? And my little brother said, no, that's a terrible idea. You start doing things like that, and who knows what it'll lead to. And I think that's the year when my little brother Joe became the most patient person in the whole world. Merry Christmas. Leave your presents alone.
Thank you, Donald. Presents from our relatives, and we feel like not all of us have been here for 30 years. I think Donald has. But all of us at least over 20 years, so that we feel like we're relatives and we have family here in Midland. I just want to give a nod to this fellow who's sitting here on the stage, and there's one in the other room as well. That Patty Smith, who was in the Midland Independent School District as a head of social studies for over 40 years, you may not have known, had a large collection of monkeys. And many of them she put out during this time of the year. And so we just want to, give a nod to Patty starting this, bringing us together. Hopefully she is smiling down on us. And you just got to open four presents here, but we've got more presents for you this evening at 7 p.m. We hope that you will return and bring some folks with you from your family. Thank you so much for coming and supporting us. Enjoy the rest of your day.